South Bend should have to live in fear from an officer who's sworn to protect their lives. We're faced with a situation that there's an officer in particular who's had a 2-year history of abuse of power and excessive force. This cannot be. We're here today unified with one voice to speak out and say this community will no longer tolerate abuse of power or excessive force being used against any citizen, whether black, white, red, yellow, of any color in the city of South Bend. We call on the city administration and the chief of police to immediately terminate Officer Knepper. The facts have been very clear. This is an officer who participated in forcing a citizen to take a cinnamon challenge. Later, after he reported this claim, the citizen also reported that his tire had been flattened. When we contacted the police department to follow up on that, we were told that a juvenile had been arrested in the tire flattening incident. This later on turned out not to be true. We fast forward to the situation with the Franklin family, when Officer Knepper was involved in an unlawful entry into a home of a family at 3:10 in the morning, where he proceeded to assault a 17-year-old child who was asleep. This is outrageous. This community will no longer accept or tolerate this type of conduct from anyone in law enforcement. Law enforcement is sworn to protect us, not to perpetrate violence or crime against us. We have no confidence in this administration or in this current chief. Knepper has, over the last 2 years, under 2 chiefs, demonstrated he does not deserve the right to wear the uniform of a South Bend police officer. Many of us have friends in law enforcement. We understand the importance of law enforcement, but we cannot allow one man to tarnish the community relationship of all law enforcement officers because of his misconduct and his acts. Therefore, in addition to calling for him to immediately be fired, we're also asking the City Council to begin formulating necessary legislation to create a citizens review board. A citizens review board that has teeth. Teeth meaning that it has the authority to issue subpoenas and also conduct a parallel investigation separate from the police department and report directly to the public. This situation should not have happened. I quote to you what the chief said to the media last week, which is that he believed that the community should speak out with a moral voice. Chief, we're doing that today. Unified behind me are a number of pastors, community leaders, community organizers, who've all dedicated their lives to improving this community. Yes. We've come together today to say, as one voice, we will no longer tolerate this kind of condition. If you want us to work with law enforcement, you must first demonstrate that you can address violence within your own ranks. Yes. If you cannot rein in or discipline an officer, how do you expect us to go to these citizens to work with and tell them to work with you if you can't even discipline someone in your own ranks? This is intolerable. We will not take it. We will not stand for it.
I have a question. I didn't see your group come out when Theo Robert pummeled an inmate who was in handcuffs at the county jail. Why now? Why this officer, and why not when Theo Robert went through his incident?
Well, this organization was just formed by Apostle Coates recently, People Uniting for a Better Government. Although we have separate entities standing here today, we are united by this umbrella organization. This is a recent creation.
But before then, you had Citizens United who was holding similar types of press conferences, and I didn't hear from you then when that was happening.
Well, if you're going to try and talk about Theo Roberts, I think that's also the same officer that was suspended for going to follow up on an investigation at 7-Eleven. And he was suspended, if you're going to use that example of pummeling an officer and going to investigate, but Knepper has not. So if you're saying that we didn't call for Theo Roberts, he was suspended. Well, what we need to call for discipline when he's been suspended, but this officer has not been suspended.
You're asking for this officer to be taken off the street, fired completely, right? That's what you want?
Well, we believe that an officer who goes into someone's home at 3:10 in the morning without the homeowner's permission, without a warrant, pummels a 17-year-old, should be dismissed for that reason alone. But if you add the fact that he's also been accused by a young man of violating his rights through abuse of power by forcing him to take the cinnamon challenge and then attempt to cover it up by stabbing his tires and then attempt to cover that up This is intolerable. He shouldn't be a sworn police officer.
When we talked with police and investigators on Friday, though, because I asked this question, why aren't you telling us anything? Where are the facts? Where's the information? They said, wouldn't you want the same if you were under investigation, for us to complete our investigation, come up with all the facts? You've been convicted before,
Correct.
Burglary,
Correct.
rape,
Correct.
criminal deviant conduct.
Exactly.
You went through a trial.
Exactly.
Do you think that this officer needs the same kind of treatment to at least go through that investigation? It hasn't even been a week since this
Well,
happened.
first of all, if you want to address my situation, I think it's been publicly known that a number of organizations have challenged the method in which I was convicted under. As a matter of fact, there's a pardon petition pending right now in front of Mike Pence where I'm asserting my innocence. That information is produced to the media in 92 pages showing clearly that I was set up by some of the same people who are involved in this community today. The situation has not changed. I fought it back in the 1990s. I'm fighting it now. Corruption in any form, under any circumstance, will be addressed. I do not shy away from it.
And
I
you
make it
maintain,
very clear.
You maintain your innocence in that case.
And not only have I maintained my innocence, I've proven my innocence. We have a corrupt system here that convicts innocent African Americans on a regular basis, and there's no system in which to address that illegal and unjustified sentence.
Do you dislike police officers?
I have several friends who are police officers.
White police officers?
I have several friends who are white police officers.
So why do you think nothing's happened to him yet? Who's
Because of the culture
protecting
of
him?
corruption. It hasn't happened over the tenure of not only acting Chief Hurtley, but currently Chief Teachman.
This guy
I think-
almost beat this guy to death, for crying out loud. You're talking a guy in a county police department that punched a man. This guy almost beat this guy to death. The hospital had to put him in a drug-induced coma. There's no comparison to those two situations that you're asking about.
He was a city police officer at the time. It was at the county jail.
City police officer or not, you're talking one or two punches versus this guy supposedly being on him, according to what his mother said, beating him near death. And then he had to be put into a drug-induced coma because of his injuries. There's a serious difference between the two cases you're bringing up together.
Well,
here.
I think there's a disconnect in reality here. I think the effort is to try and point the finger at Officer Theo Roberts, when the reality is Theo Roberts hasn't been sued by two different families for abuse of power and for excessive force. I think the disconnect here is when the chief tells us to stand up in a moral voice, and we stand here with a moral voice, and there's an effort made to discredit or to minimize what's going on here. This officer has a documented history. We know that there's a problem in South Bend with not only the South Bend police, but also with South Bend's justice. We intend on addressing all of that. At this point, we're here to address the matter with Aaron Knepper. He should not be a police officer. Anyone that would like information on my case is more than welcome to do an interview with me. And I'll lay out lovingly how Tim Corbett and others were involved in setting me up. That's why these men are standing here.
Does anyone there know the police officer? Has anyone interacted with Aaron up here? Like, I'm just trying to get at, like, do you think he's just someone who was a good guy who kind of got lost in the corruption, or do you think that, he's in on it?
Well, he beat, I don't know if you saw the pictures, during a traffic stop, he subjected this man to incredible violence. And we don't even understand the facts of this traffic stop. From what we understand from the media reports, he only drove a half a block to his house before he pulled over. What happened in that half an hour? We don't understand, because we've been told to wait the outcome of the investigation, just as we've been told in the past to wait the outcome of investigations from people we don't think have credibility. Tim Corbett himself has been disciplined for threatening a police officer. So you had the head of the investigation who himself has been charged with a violent act.
Mario, they have to remember, we've got Tim Corbett here who said, hey, there's nothing on these police tapes. Let's wait and let this investigation go. Now it's been years. We've got $1 million of our tax dollars invested in that case. We still haven't solved that. We don't know what's there. We've got a chief who doesn't have roots here. There's rumors floating around right now that come October, he's out of our city and heading back east. So you know what? If he doesn't have any roots here, he doesn't care. You've got citizens who take cases to the police department, and the chief does not want to look into them and investigate them. He wants to send them wherever and kick them under a rug and say, hey, let's handle this as a civil matter instead of a criminal matter, because he doesn't want to do his job here. So this is why the people are here. It has nothing to do with anything else. Today, we're here for this incident.
Oh, well, I guess my question is Theo Roberts patrolling the streets of South Bend? And the answer is no. So for that incident, he's been disciplined, but for 2 lawsuits against this officer, we're told to wait the outcome of investigation.
But Theo had his due process in front of the Board of Public Safety. You know,
We're asking for a Citizens Review Board because we don't believe in South Bend that many minorities can receive a fair hearing before any entity that's been compiled by the administration.
tell me more about that board. What's your vision for how you would want it
Well,
set
they've
up? How you
operated,
see-
these aren't, first of all, there was a call for a Citizen Review Board back in the year 2004 that was put forth by the St. Joseph County Greens Party and was published in the newspaper, and I believe in WSBT on one of the news reports. But if you look across the country, you'll see San Diego has one, New York City has one, a city of similar size, which would be Iowa City, has one. The whole idea is to ensure that citizens have a say. This is our government. We should have the opportunity to understand through a transparent process how this discipline works. You have a situation here where the state police issued a report to the Board of Public Safety, apparently with negative information about Chief Teachman, causing the chairman of the Board of Public Safety to resign, but the mayor refused to release it. We couldn't see it, but he said it was okay. That's the type of environment here. We don't trust this administration. We do not trust this police chief. It is not a blanket indictment of law enforcement in South Bend. I think that many law enforcement officers would like to have Aaron